My name is Fatima. I'm 59 now, but the story I'm about to tell happened when I was in high school. My parents traveled constantly for work and had a hard time leaving me alone for so long. So they thought it'd be a good idea to send me to a Catholic boarding school in the city of Campeche for a few months. During my time at the convent, some of the nuns who taught us were really kind, but others, like the Mother Superior, you didn't want to mess with. We were all terrified of her because she was way too strict and handed out pretty harsh punishments if we broke the rules. Back then, everything was different. Our parents allowed those punishments because, well, religion had them brainwashed at that time. I had a group of 4 friends I hung out with all the time. One of them, Rocio, was the craziest of us all. Sometimes she'd convince us to sneak out of the dorm at night and go drink in the convent's back patio, where there was an abandoned dorm building. Nobody ever went there. It was dark and far from the rooms where the convent members slept. Honestly, the 4 of us were at the convent against our will, and we were so sick of being locked up every single day. We'd give in and sneak out now and then at night to drink beer that Rocio's older sister would smuggle in for her on visiting days. One of those nights, we were just talking, laughing, and drinking outside that abandoned building when suddenly Sophia, another friend, stopped mid-laugh and went quiet, staring dead set at one of the windows. She said, "Girls, can you see her?" We all turned, and with the faint moonlight reflecting off, we were sure of what we saw. There was a nun staring at us, eyes wide with rage. But what I noticed right away was her smile, so huge, like she was forcing it with all her might, like it was her greatest thrill to have caught us. But more than that, it was an expression of pure fury. Our only instinct was to bolt back to our dorm. We left the bottles and every trace of our escape behind. We were terrified because we knew we'd get punished, our parents would be called, and we might even get expelled. We were scrambling to come up with an excuse for the next day, but we had no idea which nun had seen us. The face we saw didn't match any nun at the convent. The next day, we were bracing for punishment and lectures, but nobody called us in. Nobody said a word. Everything went on like nothing happened. We were shocked because we knew how serious this was. First, being out after hours, and second, and worse, drinking alcohol. Days passed, and Rocio convinced us to sneak out again at night. This time without alcohol, just to hang out for a bit since it had been so long. And we felt confident that the nun who saw us had let it slide and hadn't ratted us out. Sounds stupid, I know, but we listened to Rocio and went back to that building. But for some reason, that night, the air felt colder. The atmosphere was heavy. I couldn't stop getting chills, and I had this overwhelming sense of dread. We all agreed there was a weird vibe in that place. Just as we were talking about it, we heard a noise coming from the abandoned building, like someone had slammed a door. I was scared out of my mind, but Rocio tried to calm us down, saying it was probably an animal. Since there were broken windows, animals could easily get through. But Erica, another friend, wasn't convinced. She said we should go check it out, that it might be fun. I told them they were crazy if they thought I was going in there. You could barely even see where you were walking. But yeah, they convinced me in the end. Plus, I didn't want to be left outside alone. That scared me even more. We went in through a door near where we'd been sitting. I was at the back, holding Rocio's hand. We opened the door slowly. You could barely see with the little bit of natural light coming in from the patio. Everything was covered in dust, dead bugs, old furniture, trash, and this rotten smell. We went up the stairs, which creaked horribly, since the noise had come from the second floor. We entered a room with old beds. Everything was filthy. It looked like it had been a nun's bedroom. There were tons of crucifixes on the walls and old rosaries on the furniture. But I noticed writings on the wall in another language, symbols I didn't recognize. The crosses had a slightly different shape than what we're used to. This was the room where we'd seen the nun watching us from the window. I was getting more and more anxious. I just wanted them to finish their little adventure so we could get out of there. We left that room and went to the main hallway, where there were more bedrooms. Rocio and Sophia split off to go check out the ground floor. I stayed with Erica, who didn't want to go downstairs because she wanted to see what was behind the other doors. When we stepped out of the room, we heard footsteps coming from the last bedroom. Erica and I thought it was our friends coming back up, so we peeked into the hallway. But at the far end, where the darkness was almost complete, there was a nun staring right at us. I could barely make out her silhouette, but I recognized that same smile from the other night, full of rage, with that unsettling glare. Her face filled us with a terror that left us frozen, just staring at the nun, not knowing who she was or how such a heavy, negative energy could radiate from her. She just kept staring, not moving, never stopping that smile. It was the most horrifying expression I've ever seen in my life. I don't know where I found the courage, but I snapped out of it, grabbed Erica's arm, and ran out of there. We rushed down the stairs, screaming for our two friends who were on the bottom floor. They had no idea what was happening, but they saw the terror on our faces and knew something was seriously wrong. The four of us got out of there and ran straight to our dorm. We ran into one of the kindest nuns. She was shocked and asked what we were doing out at that hour. But before she could even mention punishment, I think she saw the fear written all over our faces. Erica didn't hesitate for a second. She cut her off and told her everything that had happened and what we saw in that building. The nun's face went pale with shock and fear. She asked, "You went in there?" We said yes and told her the whole story. Her face got whiter and whiter as she listened. She didn't say anything. She just walked us to our dorm in silence. When we got there, she said she was going to tell us what happened there almost 40 years ago, when she had first arrived. She said she'd only tell us so we would never go near that building again, especially at night. When I entered the convent, there was a nun named Carmen who had been living here for a long time. She was kind of a loner. When she had to speak to someone, she said only what was necessary. She didn't socialize with anyone, and at mealtime, we never saw her. Almost all the time, she was writing somewhere no one could see her. One day, in that building, which used to be the dormitory for all the sisters, including me, animal noises came from her room. It sounded like there were goats and pigs inside. That night, we all suspected what was happening. When we went to knock on her door and asked if everything was okay, and what those noises were. There was silence. We tried to open the door, but it was locked. Then, suddenly, from inside, we heard demonic laughter and a language we couldn't understand. It was something we had never heard before. It kept getting more intense. It was bone-chilling. We all grabbed our rosaries and started praying while the Mother Superior looked for the key to that room. The laughter grew louder and more mocking. When they finally got the door open, Sister Carmen was hanging in her closet. There was nothing we could do for her. It was too late. But what terrified us the most was the pentagram drawn in blood on the floor, surrounded by lit candles, and right in the middle, an open book on the occult. Sister Carmen had been holding satanic seances in her room every night. And that night, everything spiraled out of control. After we buried Sister Carmen, that room was left abandoned. No one dared to live in it because every night noises could be heard, footsteps, even macabre laughter. The other sisters started leaving the building and setting up new dorms here, where the storage room used to be. Before I knew it, only one other sister and I were still sleeping there. We thought that with such strong faith, we had nothing to fear. Until one night, when I went downstairs for a glass of water, I saw her. I saw her staring at me with these huge black eyes and that smile, so diabolical and evil. To this day, I still see her when I close my eyes. I recognized Sister Carmen immediately, but with the energy radiating from her, or from that thing, I knew it wasn't Carmen. That wasn't human. The way it looked at me, I knew that if I didn't get out of there, something far worse would happen. I ran upstairs to the other sister's room, and we ran to tell the Mother Superior, who said she had seen her before too. She knew something evil inhabited that building. A few days later, she had it sealed off, and it's been abandoned ever since. The sisters who know the story won't even set foot in that back patio. Many of the nuns who work here now have also seen something peering out the window, with that same dark gaze and cold smile. That's why it's so important you never go back there. Something terrible could happen to you. It's not just a dead nun, it's something else. My friends and I were horrified by everything that had happened in that convent. So much so that the next day, Erica's parents and mine were already waiting for us outside because they had heard the terror in our voices when we called them that same night. Rocio and Sophia stayed a couple more months. To this day, that boarding school has been torn down, and I think it's government offices now. But I have never been able to forget that presence, those big, dark eyes that lived in that boarding school. Even now, at night, I can still see her, staring at me from the corner of my room, smiling. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to subscribe for more terrifying content. Like this video and share it with your friends. Help me spread the fear. See you next time.